So yes, non-duality can change your life. Even though the recognition of it, or the energetic shift, whatever you call it, is instantaneous and not happening to a person. So it's not the person that awakes. It's not a timeline that awakens. It's not a body that awakens. It is consciousness waking back up to itself. But it's never really been asleep. But even though that is prior to the body-mind mechanism, and it's not to do with the body-mind mechanism, the only thing you could say is maybe there is a release somewhere in the body-mind mechanism. So something drops away in the body-mind, but that's an unknown. And the effects of that can be dramatic in the personal life. So it depends. It seems like there's different levels of awakening. After 12 years, I'm now talking about levels. Yeah. So, after 12 years, I'm talking about levels. But there seems to be different levels, like or different levels of the integration into the person. Maybe that's a better way to say it. So from watching now, and from being with people for so many years now in non-duality, there can be the mind awakening, which is a mental realization. There can be a heart awakening, which is an emotional, energetic awakening. And then there can be an energetic expansion that happens where awareness or big consciousness goes back into itself. My favorite saying from Nisargadatta at the moment is where consciousness meets beingness. So where the consciousness and the beingness stop being inside the body, but they go back out into everything. So there is this massive energetic expansion that happens. And the other parts is like the dropping of the seeking or the self, the illusory self. And it doesn't seem like all of these things come together. It seems like for some it does, but for some it's that they have these different parts that awaken in them at different times. It's really interesting. And why not? If this life is infinite possibilities, then why not that there's infinite ways in which awakening can happen? And I love that it's all included. I feel like that's the true nature of non-duality. If we look at India, where non-duality seemed to really thrive, like Hinduism and Indian culture, it's so inclusive of all different religions. There's so many different gods, there's so many different paths, there's so many different ways. And from my understanding of Hinduism, it doesn't exclude any way. It gives credence to all ways. It's only the people that become involved in it that begin to say, no, my path is better than yours, or my awakening is better than yours. But I just say that just as a precursor to what I'm going to say, where can non-duality change your life? So I feel like all of it changes the person, all of these different awakenings, but to different degrees. So the kind of more mental awakening, which is when the mind recognizes that consciousness, or that there's something looking at the mind. So there's something that is watching the mind, and there's some form of separation that happens there. I don't know what some people might call that witnessing, but other people might say, no, that isn't witnessing, that's something else. And that's profound, that shift, that recognition. That does affect the person. To realize, even if it's on a mental level, that consciousness, there is something watching the person. And I think this is what a lot of people call waking up, although I'm never always sure what people are calling waking up. But to recognize it is a really profound thing. That's no small feat. That's really profound. And yeah, that's going to shift the way that you look at the world and the way that you interact with the world. It's really divine. Because once that's been seen, that part, you can't really go back to unseeing it. It can kind of be some form of forgetting, but it's like on the tip of your tongue. You kind of know that you aren't everything, that there is something else. And that will change your thinking and change your karma, your behaviors, your habits. It might not do it instantaneously, but it will do it. So, yeah, sometimes people get to that stage and they think that that's all. They think that that's the end of what the teachers are speaking about. And they're like, my God, is this it? Nothing's happened. I just realized that there's something watching the person. And they feel very disappointed. And I sometimes hear videos of people talking about how ordinary it is. And it's not something special. And I think they're talking about this shift, this part of awakening. And in the moment, I don't think it changes anything emotionally. But I think through time, it changes a lot. And I think it's phenomenal. And I think that a lot of the people in the audience have had that shift. What a phenomenal, amazing community we are. We don't need to argue about which teacher's better, which teaching's best, which awakening is the ultimate. Like just that is something we can all celebrate together. That's freaking amazing. Yeah. And maybe at this point your head is in the tiger's mouth once this is realized. You can't unrealize it. So yeah, please comment in Telegram if I'm having any technical issues, just because my wonderful partner has upgraded my system and made it better, and this is the first trial. We did 2 test runs this afternoon. Sound is perfect. Yeah. So that really, is a phenomenal thing to happen. And it only gets deeper from that. Only gets deeper. After that, which doesn't always have to be the first one that happens, you can actually have the awakening of the heart first. But we're going to go as if we have the awakening of the mind first. That, after that awakening, it still most probably doesn't feel like emptiness is experiencing. It still feels like you are experiencing. But there is some bigger knowing. There is some expansion in perception and bigger knowing. And when it's talked about, it's understood, it's recognized, and there can be more of a moving back to that. Maybe you're still practicing putting the attention in the attention. And I say still, not as a dismissal. That's just the nature of words. It's like phenomenal for that to have happened. It's like, makes me want to cry that there's these apparent humans out there that have also recognized this. Yeah. What a celebration. Yeah. So after that happens, maybe some people give up for a period and are disappointed by that and think, ugh, it hasn't made my life better. I'm going off to enjoy some sensory pleasure, primarily eating, sexing, and excreting. Yeah. But eventually, and for some there won't be a stopping there, but eventually those that do stop there will come back. And this next part is where the seeking gets challenged. So what seeking is to me, and the way that I was taught it by my phenomenal teachers, which maybe I should name out of reverence, Roger Castillo, Ramesh Balsika, who was his teacher, also my teacher, but Roger was with him longer. I met Roger through Ramesh, and Ramesh told me I had to listen to everything Roger said. Tony Parsons, the almighty Gangaji, Sangharakshita from the foundation of the Western Buddhist order, which is now another name that is difficult for a dyslexic. And so many others, but they were most probably the main teachers. And part of the reason that I name them is YouTube's doing an amazing thing where it's recognizing you naming people and then putting a link to them below. So you can just look down there and find those teachers. And I would have more than likely gone to more female teachers if there was them, but it was so hard to get any non-duality teachers. Back in the day. So the next part, as described to me by my teachers and from my own experience, is this seeking dynamic. And what seeking is the belief that what you're looking for will arrive from pleasure. So the Buddhists call it craving. So the belief that pleasure will eventually get you home and pain will take you away from home. And the home that you're looking for is actually the big consciousness and beingness, the meeting of the big consciousness and beingness, the no thing and the everything. This is what you're looking for. And the belief is it's found in an object. And this starts in very early childhood, and most probably starts in lives before that. You're not sure if there's lives, but most probably there's lives before that. But it doesn't start seemingly until the brain encounters a certain age. So you get a few years prior to it starting before that kicks in. So the body-mind has habits and conditions. So habit will be a way of being. Habits can be taught, or you could be born with them, and the same with conditions. And you can equally have trauma, and that's not seeking. These were there prior to the seeking starting. So the baby could be traumatized at 1 year old by being dropped on its head, and for its rest of its life it will have a sensitivity around the head, maybe. It can even be born with its parents' traumas. So if your grandparents or parents were in the war, then you can be born with that trauma. And that's not a spiritual idea. That's validated also in psychology, where they've tested it, unfortunately, on rats, that you can inherit trauma. The seeking starts at somewhere maybe between 2, 5, 10 years old, depending on your predisposition. And in the very rare few, it never starts. And the seeking is this, what creates the I, the illusory I. So seeking is the belief that you are a form. So prior to the seeking starting, you were. So the big beingness came into the body, and there was a sense of I am. But then when the seeking starts, you become I am Bob. I am Teresa. I am Muhammad. I am Alex. And that's actually the beginning of seeking. That's the first seeking pattern. And like a tree has the momentum to grow upwards, most trees, the seeking is a momentum to be a form at its base. And its basic feeling is a fear of death, pain, and a fear of being abandoned, so a lack of love. So that's the seeking. And the first seeking is I am a name, and that is the attempt to be something, to fit in with society, and it's an attempt to not be dead. It's weird. Because of my severe neurodiversity, in my day it was called learning difficulties, but now they're trying to rephrase it because they realize that it's not learning difficulties, it's just a different brain. Isn't that fantastic? That everything in our society is being incorporated. There isn't this one standard normal person that's just got good memory and does well at school. So because of my severe, like quite extreme, I mean even saying severe is negative, but extreme neural diversity, I struggled with speech, which is funny, 'cause now look what I do. And I struggled with comprehension around speech. So yeah, it was predominantly around speech that was my problem. I seemingly was good at tasks and completing tasks, but when it came to speech, I often couldn't pronounce words. I would say them muddled up, or I wouldn't speak. And I had to go for a speech therapy. I actually have it now still. I kind of stutter, but it's not noticed because I do such a good job at covering up. And I'm not stuttering out of nervousness. I'm stuttering because I forget my words. They don't come naturally to me, words. So you might hear me like the word's not quite coming and I'm going to speak. Yeah. So sometimes you notice I say the wrong words, or back to front, or I say do and I mean didn't, so I'm actually saying the opposite. Anyway, enough about me. Because of this, I remember becoming someone, because becoming someone and seeking are deeply connected to thinking and words. So it comes with words. We didn't have this seeking prior to speaking. Animals don't have this seeking. It's a human phenomena that comes with words and the idea of objective, an object, a center, an idea of a me. Subjective. Oh, I forget. You see, this is dyslexia. I remember this happening, and I remember the insistence of people around me to call myself Lisa, me. And it was really painful for me to do. And I would reject it and try to avoid it. And I remember them getting to write my name, and this pressure for me to call myself Lisa, a me. And so I remember this pressure, but a lot of people maybe don't remember this pressure that they were under to be somebody. And this is why it's the first seeking, because it's the seeking to fit in, to be loved by those that surround you, and a fear of being kicked out and abandoned. Like, you have to be someone to fit into society. And I remember this moment where this feeling like if I didn't speak, I would not ever fit in with society. I would not be a part of it. I would be on the outskirts. I wouldn't be able to relate with people. And I remember this seeming choice. And I assume if that hadn't happened, I would have been put into special needs schools. My mum denies this now, but I was always told that the school said that I needed to go to a special needs school. But she says that's not true now, but I think that she forgets. But so do I. But she's at the time when she forgets. So I was always told that they wanted to put me in a special needs school. Yeah. And my parents fought it and eventually got my IQ tested. So, so this seeking is what creates an I. So it's not what creates a character or the ability to talk about a character. It's this energetic force that is always trying to be something, and it always feels agitated, and it creates a location inside the body. So before that, you were everywhere and nowhere. You were the big consciousness meeting the big beingness. And then this started, and then you became something in here from the phenomena that I've just described, and it grows over time. So as a child, you might remember a lot of freedom and wonder because it wasn't very strong, this location. And through time, you became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The you. Yes. So this is another part that crumbles in awakening. So after you've had the realization, the intellectual realization that you are not the person, the character, that you're something beyond that, that there is something watching that, what then begins to happen is the deconstruction of that seeker. There might have been the deconstruction before that realization, but it continues and it gets deeper and deeper. The Buddhists would say that you're in the stream. Like even if you abandon non-duality and go back into the world, in a way, everything you experience in the world will be pointing to deconstruct this. It's like you've stepped into the river of this realization, and the river can only lead you to the big, gigantic ocean. So, and then you will go through a process which is very energetical, of deconstructing that seeking. And as you deconstruct that seeking, you'll go from the head to the heart. The head to the heart. So you will be challenged externally, because the internal and the external in the end are the same thing. And internally you will challenge yourself by investigation, emotional release, body work. This will all begin to appear in your life through the relationships that you have. All of it will create an inward investigation to deconstruct the seeking. And that seemingly goes through time. And the more that it gets deconstructed, the more there will be a movement of attention from just being behind the eyes to being in the heart. This isn't for everyone, this process, because some people waken from the heart first. But this is how it goes in many ways. So you go down to the heart, and then you will begin to recognize, there'll still be seeking there maybe, but it will be greatly reduced. And then you might recognize at that point this I am. You might have intellectually got the I am, but you'll begin to feel it. And you'll begin to feel that the I am is love. Like I am. If you repeat that to yourself, it's love. I am. And you begin to taste it and get a feeling for it. And you might even begin to reside there. And you might do practice. That's another one, is cultivating attention that happens with deconstructing the seeking. And this is a next phase of awakening, this realizing there is the I am. And it will continue the deconstruction of your seeking patterns. And then at some point, they will begin to get very thin. They will be seen through very quickly. So you'll begin to seek something, and you'll just know that you're seeking something. So in the past, say if you're seeking a romantic relationship, you might believe that they complete you, and that's only them, and if you don't have them, your life is over. Whereas now, when that comes up, you might realize that that intensity is actually from a lack of parent love in childhood, for example. And when it happens, you can go very quickly back to it, and this fades away. There's a quick going back, and it's recognized in the body, you know. You've got the stories which are in the mind about what you're seeking, and you recognize it through the body. You realize that in that great urge for that woman or that man or that non-binary person, you realize from that there is a feeling of discomfort in the body. Actually, that is covering up a discomfort, and you can get to it really quickly. And by this stage, everything's become very thin. You see through the illusions. Emotions are coming and going quicker. The emotions might be bigger and stronger, but they're coming and going quicker. There's less attachment. And this is phenomenal. This is freaking amazing. It's amazing that that's happening, and this is so deep, and it's not appreciated enough by people that are seeking or by people that are teaching, that is beyond that there are human beings that do this, that are prepared to deconstruct themselves. And as you go from the mind to the body, you might really begin to see that there is no doership. Like when you're really resting attention in the body and being very present, you see that thoughts and feelings and emotions are appearing not from a location, not from a person. So you can begin to really see this, that doership is a lie, that all thoughts are a lie, that there's no right or wrong. And maybe really see that your true nature is not knowing, that no thought is true. So everything's becoming very thin, very thin. And then at some point, after all of this, there will be this energetic explosion, which is phenomenal, where the consciousness, big consciousness, and the I am stop being personalized and located in the body, and they go back into everything. So the body still feels that sense of I am and a personal awareness, but the big consciousness behind the personal awareness and the big beingness behind the I am go forward into everything. And this is phenomenal. This is where it's deeply known, not through the intellect, but by experience in the very instant. Everything is empty and full simultaneously, and everything is you as that one, as the big one, as the ultimate. That it's not the I am, or the beingness doesn't belong to somebody in here. So it doesn't mean the character stops, or the habits, or the conditions, or the trauma stop. There's this big energetic explosion where they stop being in the body. And this can come with immense bliss and positive feelings, and can be very healing. Although it doesn't have to be healing. But you've heard some magical stories where, like there's this one lady where it happened to, where she healed her cancer. But that's not a given. That's what happened in that story. Yeah, Ramana Krishna, he died at 51 of cancer, so it's not a given. and he was a great Indian saint. And with this big energetic movement, there can be lots of Kundalini arising. There could have been lots of Kundalini before as well, or what they call Kundalini. There can be lots of energetic movement in the body. And with this movement, although it might have begun to happen before, everything becomes very energetic first. So the emotions are very energetic and connected to the chakras. There's a lot more of unknown, of mystery. And this stage, with this big explosion, where there's lots of bliss, that can really change the person. So the other ones change the person, but this one can really change the person. The person can remain with the same habits and conditions, but they become maybe very see-through, and maybe very big traumas get very reduced. But not necessarily, it seems to be different. But from meeting people that had these big energetic shifts, normally the personality changes a lot. Like they might have struggled with depression or anxiety before, and that can sometimes really go with this big energetic shift. Yeah. And there could have been a lot of like relaxation of that prior to it as well. From my experience of this big explosion is afterwards the body-mind still has habits and conditions, so it can still, get caught in difficulties with other humans. So say if you've got a habit of being over chatty or overbearing, that might still remain. If you've got a habit of quick to anger, that might still remain, but it might totally disappear. So yeah, and for me personally, I still get what I call old seeking patterns coming up. So, and those seem to fade and get exposed more and more over the years, but they're very light, Advaita light. So for example, but it's hard to know. So for example, I was going to say the caffeine one. Like I started caffeine when I was like 10 years old maybe. In England we start young on the tea. It's not considered like coffee, it's like any 10-year-old, a 5-year-old can have it. Yeah, maybe it's the same in India. The tea. And you see, I'm not sure if that's habit or condition or old seeking patterns. This is where it gets very hard to define. So it doesn't feel like it contracts me as such, but I can feel that energy coming up at points that, it's like it's not properly listening to the body and it wants to have high energy. So I don't know, it's hard you begin to not be able to find that boundary anymore. It's like becomes a very fine line, that part. But it's just habits or conditioning. It doesn't come with like a translation app or something in the brain. This is seeking and this isn't. So I just say that to cover all bases, because I feel like you should endeavor as a human to always expand. Just like the plants expand towards the light, we should endeavour to expand. So even after these big shifts, there's not an idea of arrival on the human level. There's this idea of expanding. Like, I can, as a human on the human level, let in more love. I can be more compassionate. I can be kinder. I can be less reactive. I can be more generous. I can have better boundaries. That's my one. Yeah, being a helper characteristic, boundaries are important. Yeah. So the process of awakening on the apparent human level is not easy. It's not easy. For some, it is, but that's very few. For most, you have to really confront the seeking patterns, which I think a lot of people call the shadow, but I wasn't taught it like that, so I call it seeking patterns. And that's the hidden motivation underneath, the shadow side. And you have to become more genuine, not lying. The human in seeking mode is kind of lying to itself and to the external. Like, for example, I don't want to make myself out to be like some wonderfully enlightened human on the human level, because I'm not. I have my flaws. But I just give an example of this women's group I'm in from childhood. We have a chat group, and I've known them since childhood. And they have done some investigation into themselves, but not much. And what I noticed is that they're all competing with each other, but they have no idea that they're competing with each other. So, it's like, whose house is the shiniest? Who is the best mother? And they don't know they're doing that. They just feel this like reactivity and harshness comes. And there's a lot of passive aggression, but none of them are really conscious of it. And all of this really has to be confronted, not for the first initial one, but after that initial realization that there is something watching the person, so the realization of awareness, that you aren't the person, you're awareness, and you're going from the head to the heart. These sorts of behaviors have to be really confronted, and it's really painful to confront them. So if I confronted any of those women in that group, most of them would most probably have a hissy fit and accuse me of being in competition with them, of me being belittling, of me being this and that. They would not go down quickly or easily. They will really, really resist because of shame, feeling not good enough, because they have an idea of themselves that they're a nice person and they don't want to see this side of themselves. So the resolution to keep looking inwards and to keep going is, really intense. And that's often where the teacher comes in, or a mentor comes in, to help reflect that back and to help that journey inwards. Yeah. I was so lucky to have Roger Castillo. He should be in the box below now because I've mentioned his name. He really confronted me on my shit. He really machine gunned me. I'd be speaking to him and playing all nice, and he'd be like, "You're really angry with me. You're being furious. You're passive." And I'd be like, my whole face would be like going, trying to remain smiling and nice, and then inside there'd be deep rage, but I'd be in denial of it. It was really hard. I felt like monsters came out of me. I felt like I realized that I could be a murderer. I could be a pedophile. I could be the villain of any type, pushed to the, in that seeking energy, when that seeking energy doesn't get what it wants to the extremes, it can do anything. It can do anything. I realized that my goodness or my niceness or any identity that I had about myself weren't inherent to me. Lisa was what she was because of a set of conditions. And generally, she had very good conditions, even though there was some very difficult things that happened in childhood. But compared to most of the people in the world, she had a lot of good, privileged conditions. Yeah. Okay. And sometimes I feel that people on this path, they expect to just watch videos, to understand things intellectually, do a bit of crying, and then, well, why aren't I there yet? My goodness. If we counted up the amount of emotional releasing hours I did with Roger and like intensive therapy stuff I did with the Buddhist group, with Roger, there are those 10 years. Like I didn't work much. I did work some, but my priority was to do this, not to work for 10 years. It was dedicated to this 24/7. Yeah, going on retreats for 10, 20 days, 10 hours meditation a day, sometimes people look at me and get the wrong impression that it was like a couple of realizations and wham, bam, thank you, mum. I burned in hell for years with Roger. Not all the time, but there was lots of it. Like I would lay on the bed for days, like my body would be shaking because of all the Kundalini stuff and energy. For days I wouldn't be able to get out of bed because it was so intense energetically. I'd go screaming, crying, it was like a monster was coming out of me. People from the outside would think I was insane. I went mad there. I was so lucky to have Roger, who was so kind and patient with me. And that also takes maturity. To really appreciate your teachers. Because your teachers, they also have a humanness. So to be able to see beyond that humanness in them and the divine magic that's coming through them. Like Roger had his humanness. Ramesh had his humanness. There was all this sex scandal stuff that happened with Ramesh. But to be able to see the gems of them, even if they did stuff which is considered abusive, I'm not saying allow yourself to abuse or not condemn what Ramesh did, but you see it's not really about them. And we all have our humanness. It took me 10 years after that big pop to really integrate what happened with me and Roger. To really integrate that narrative, that was so intense, and come to a peace with it. Yeah. What a chatterbox I've been. That is nearly 50 minutes I've been talking. People are sitting there popping to ask a question and I just don't stop. And look, Duracell batteries.